Because I was born hideously disfigured. My own father smothered me the moment I drew breath. To make sure I could never be reincarnated, they chopped me into pieces and scattered me in the wilderness. My father, however, didn't count on our neighbor secretly gathering my remains and giving me a quiet burial. 6 months later, my mother was pregnant again. Dad was overjoyed, completely unaware that the baby in her womb was still me. In Black Creek Hollow, it wasn't unheard of for a couple with perfectly normal features to produce a monstrous infant. It happened a few times each year. The local custom for dealing with it was brutal. The child couldn't be allowed to live, nor could it be buried. It was to be dismembered and left in the wild. This not only prevented the creature's soul from returning but also served as a warning to its kind, deterring them from seeking birth in the hollow. Desperate for a healthy child, my father followed the tradition without a second thought. He dumped my remains in the ruins of an old chapel. News of the monstrous birth spread through Black Creek Hollow like wildfire. People flocked to the chapel, curious to see what kind of monster I was. I was apparently so grotesque that one look was enough to make most people vomit and turn away. Some muttered curses, though it was unclear who they were cursing. Only one person turned back. He wrapped my small, scattered parts in his own thin shirt and buried me beneath the old oak tree in front of the chapel. Perhaps it was a supernatural connection. But right after I was buried, my father and mother had the exact same dream. They saw me, a mangled, bloody infant, standing by their bed. In the dream, I bit my mother's stomach. She woke up screaming. Lighting a lamp, she checked her belly over and over, only relaxing when she found no teeth marks. She shouldn't have been so relieved. She seemed to forget that when I died, I was just a baby. I hadn't grown any teeth yet. A few days later, my mother began to vomit uncontrollably. She was pregnant again. 3 months passed, and as her belly swelled, a strange symptom appeared. Every few days, a small, shallow pit would form on her skin. It was intensely itchy. The town doctor was baffled, prescribing ointments that only made the pits deeper. Soon, the pits began to form neat little rows. My mother let out a blood-curdling scream when she finally realized what they were. They weren't pits. They were tooth marks. I had been dead for exactly 6 months. Had I lived, I would have been just old enough to be teething. Terrified by my mother's strange affliction, my father sought out a local wise man, a preacher who dabbled in the old ways. After some effort, the preacher determined the cause. I had been buried by a well-meaning person, breaking the rule that such creatures must never be laid to rest. That kind soul was none other than our neighbor, Caleb. Caleb had always been unlucky. He studied for years and was the first in the hollow to get into a state college, only to have his spot stolen by someone with more connections. The shock of it broke him, leaving him perpetually dazed and confused. His family was long gone, and he'd never managed to find a wife. He was utterly alone. My father was furious. This miserable failure, Caleb, was now ruining his life. He stormed over to Caleb's shack and broke his leg. Then he went to the old oak tree and dug me up. I was mostly decomposed, with only a few small, fragmented bones left. My father thanked the preacher profusely and followed his instructions, sealing my bone fragments in an earthenware jar with a blessed talisman to suppress my spirit. But my mother didn't get better as the preacher had promised. In fact, her condition worsened. The rows of tiny teeth marks on her stomach grew deeper, as if something was about to chew its way out. The preacher tried every ritual he knew. For good measure, he brought the town's most respected doctor, a man known for his near miraculous cures. With their combined knowledge of faith and medicine, they were sure they could solve the problem. But after taking my mother's pulse, the doctor's face turned pale. He held his pen for a long time without writing a prescription. When my father pressed him, he stammered that such a severe case required strong medicine. But he couldn't risk it with a pregnant woman. The doctor suggested to my father that they induce labor while the fetus was still small, to save the mother. This was not what my father wanted to hear. He punched the doctor squarely in the face, accusing him of trying to kill his son. When the preacher tried to intervene, he got 2 punches for his trouble. The doctor lost a front tooth, and the preacher's lip was split open. They scrambled out of our house, bloodied and terrified, barely escaping a kick from my father. Black Creek Hollow was a small, isolated town. Having driven off the most reputable doctor, my father had essentially cut off my mother's last hope. When my mother found out, she wailed. Not out of anger, but out of pure terror. Still, she put on a brave face. Even if I die, I will give birth to my son, she declared. I won't let that demon win. Let it try to take me. I swear I'll die first. The demon she was referring to was me. Perhaps fate was truly on their side. The very next day, a gifted healer arrived in town. It's not uncommon in the rural north to see traveling mystics pulling up in old cars, ringing a little bell, and speaking with a thick southern accent. They claim to have come from a distant land down south and can cure any ailment. As the old saying goes, a prophet is not without honor, except in his own town. To my parents, this healer was a lifeline. Her methods were peculiar. She refused to see the patient or even take a pulse. She wouldn't even step inside the house. She simply asked for a personal item belonging to my mother. My father handed her one of my mother's earrings. In a dialect he couldn't understand, she began to chant, her voice somewhere between a song and a prayer, seeking the cause of the illness. After a moment, the earring snapped in two. The healer said nothing, just shook her head and started to leave. My father desperately blocked her path. But when she wouldn't stop, he dropped to his knees and grabbed her leg. Still shaking her head, the healer couldn't move. The child is a vengeful spirit, here to collect a debt, she said. This can't be broken. And it shouldn't be. My father must have said something to her then, because she suddenly had another idea. There is one way we could try, she said, her southern accent thick and her words slow and oddly structured. You'll need a substitute. You had to listen carefully to understand her inverted logic. The spirit hasn't killed anyone yet. It's just leaving teeth marks. This means it doesn't want to cause harm. It just wants to possess your wife's unborn child and be reborn. If you find a substitute, the problem will be solved. A living person? Do we have to kill someone? My father hesitated. The healer shook her head. Not a real killing. You just need to take a single hair from that person. A nail clipping. Or a piece of cloth they've used. Even a shoe they've worn will do. Add a drop of your wife's blood from her fingertip, and bury it with the child's remains. That person will then be offered to the vengeful spirit. They will die on their own. You won't have to lift a finger. The healer pulled a packet of herbs from a worn leather pouch and exchanged it for a wad of cash from my father. After you've done all that, she instructed, have your wife drink this tea. The spirit will never be able to get near her again. The healer started to lead her beat-up sedan away. But after a short distance, she jogged back. Remember, you must give a gift to the person who will be the substitute. Anything will do. But you can't take from them for free. This is called an exchange. It's the price for their life. Otherwise, you'll owe another debt to a vengeful spirit. Dad hid the herbs in a cabinet. Mom kept the curtains drawn all day, leaving the house in darkness. Dad switched on a low-wattage yellow bulb, which cast their faces in a sickly, earthen glow. He gripped Mom's hand. Elara, just hold on a little longer. I've found a substitute. You and the baby are going to be saved. He walked out the door and went straight to the general store on West Street to buy a new pair of work boots. Then he went to the market to buy a fat hen. While he was picking one out, a man from a nearby stall offered him a bundle of green onions. Jedediah, he said, buying such a fine hen. Is your wife feeling better? My father's full name was Jedediah Moss. He used to sell odds and ends in the same market before he made some money in business and got a storefront. Then his wife got pregnant. And it seemed like a double blessing. Too bad the baby was me. A monster. Dad refused the green onions. Yeah. He muttered vaguely and hurried away. He walked back toward our house but didn't stop. Instead veering next door to Caleb's shack and knocking. Caleb's place was so poor it didn't have a proper fence. Just a rickety one made of sticks. His house was made of mud bricks. And the knock sent a shower of dirt down from the doorframe. After a long moment, Caleb answered. He'd been sleeping in the middle of the day. When he saw it was my father, he trembled and tried to shut the old wooden door. But the latch was broken. My father pushed gently. And Caleb stumbled backward, falling to the floor with the door. The leg my father had broken a few days ago had clearly not been treated. It was swollen and shiny, bent at a strange angle. Caleb shielded his face with his hands. His voice a mix of high and low pitches. I won't do it again. I swear. Never again. My father reached down and pulled him up, pushing the hen into his hands. I've been thinking, Dad said. I was wrong the other day. This is my apology. He also held out the new, sturdy work boots. The shoes on Caleb's feet were so worn they had holes in the front and back, their original color long gone. Caleb was too scared to accept them, just shaking his head and clutching his broken leg. My father knelt down and put the new boots on Caleb's feet himself. Caleb didn't make a sound. My father then picked up Caleb's old shoes and turned to leave. He hadn't gone far when Caleb limped after him, his lips moving silently. You could just make out the words "thank you." He couldn't see the smile on my father's face as he clutched the old shoes. All it took was a pair of worn-out shoes to offer Caleb up as a substitute for me. Jedediah. Jedediah. Caleb had suddenly caught up. My father instinctively hid the shoes closer to his body. I'll throw these out for you, he explained. They're too torn up to wear anymore. As he was speaking, Caleb's hand reached out, and the still squawking hen was pushed back into my father's arms. Caleb whispered earnestly, I can't take this. Your Elara is sick. Give this to her, to help her get better. My father's face darkened. Are you looking down on me? If you don't take this chicken, what about your leg? Was that for nothing? Caleb shook his head and took the chicken back into his arms. He whispered another thank you. His face filled with gratitude. He had no idea this hen was the price for his life. By sunrise tomorrow, he would be dead. Caleb and my father grew up as neighbors, attending the same one-room schoolhouse. It was a poor time. The school's blackboard was just a plastered wall, and students had to bring their own kerosene lamps for morning reading. The lamps sputtered black smoke, and after 2 hours, the students' faces would be covered in soot, only their white teeth showing. Caleb's parents were hardworking, and his sister had married well, so his family was relatively comfortable back then. Many classmates, including my father, would huddle around his lamp to read. They were deskmates for 2 years. They weren't close friends, but they weren't enemies either. Later, Caleb did well enough to get into high school. A big deal in our small town. Everyone knew he was smart enough for college, saying a phoenix had risen from the Moss family's chicken coop. No one ever mentioned my father's academic performance. His family was poor, so he started working on the farm after elementary school. Back then, everyone praised Caleb, the college student. Who knew his spot would be stolen? And he would have a mental breakdown? He was lost in a fog for 3 years, which broke his father's heart and led to his early death. After that, no one in town bothered with him. When his mother died, there was no one to even help with the burial. It was my father who gathered a few men from West Street to handle her funeral. For that, Caleb was eternally grateful. I only helped him because I remembered using his lamp when we were kids. My father muttered to himself. Who knew he'd repay my kindness with a curse? He knew that burying a monster would bring a hex, but he did it anyway. Was he trying to jinx me? He still thinks he's a college man. He's just a crazy, childless loser. His life is misery. If his shack collapses on him one day, so be it. It's better to use his life to help me. I'm doing a good deed. Just like you. You monster. You were born looking like that. Living would only be a burden on everyone. It's better that you're gone. Muttering this, my father doused Caleb's old shoes with grain alcohol, lit them on fire, and tossed them into the urn with my ashes. Dawn was approaching. He hadn't slept all night, but he didn't feel tired. After watching the shoes burn to cinders, he stood by the door and lit a hand-rolled cigarette. He took a deep drag and started coughing. When the coughing fit passed, he laughed out loud. He hadn't been laughing for more than a few seconds when a frantic banging came from the front door, mixed with the urgent shouts of several men. Jedediah. Jedediah Moss. Are you home? My father shoved the urn under the bed, glanced at my mother sleeping soundly in the curtained bed, and then went to open the door. Had Caleb died? So quickly? But even if a loner like Caleb died, it shouldn't have been discovered this soon. The moment he opened the door, a pale-faced man grabbed his arm. 2 others stood behind him, panting, their boots caked with mud. They had all just come from the fields. Jed. One of them gasped. It's your neighbor, Caleb. My father's face twitched, but his voice was steady. What's his business got to do with me? No. He's dead. The 3 men looked around nervously as if they'd seen something terrifying. Jed. We don't mean to scare you. But It looked like Caleb was hanging around your front door right before he died. My father's face turned white as a sheet. In the faint morning light, he could indeed see faint shoe prints by the door. But with people coming and going every day, it was impossible to tell who they belonged to. What nonsense are you talking about? It's not nonsense. Jed. We saw him when we were on patrol. Caleb was sitting right here. By your door. He even waved to us. Less than half an hour later, we found him dead. Black Creek Hollow was almost entirely populated by families with the same last name. And they were a tight-knit community. The town had long maintained a volunteer night watch, with men patrolling to ward off outsiders and help their own. Tonight, it was the turn of the three brothers from the Kent family, the same brothers who sold my father the hen on West Street. Just before dawn, they were making their final round. As they reached the riverbank on the west side, near a grove of trees filled with old graves, they heard someone crying. The three brothers nervously approached and found Caleb kneeling before a grave. He was already dead. Just half an hour ago, he had been alive. They couldn't figure out how he died. His flesh was torn and shredded, as if he'd been dead for a very long time. In front of the grave, there was a pot of freshly cooked chicken, still warm. To be honest, they almost didn't recognize him at first. It was only by seeing that the grave belonged to his father that they knew it was Caleb. Who else would make offerings at that grave? He was so poor. Had he stolen a chicken from someone? It was hard to say if he was being a good son. In his state, to get a chicken and not eat it himself but offer it to the dead. They just brought the body back. One brother said, Jed, why was he hanging around your house in the middle of the night? Did he say anything to you? Do you think he was holding a grudge from when you beat him up a few days ago? Man. Jed. How do you think he died? Caleb was dead. And the teeth marks on my mother's body miraculously began to fade. My father should have been relieved. But his face was stiff with anxiety. He couldn't stop thinking about why Caleb was at our door in the middle of the night. Did he hear something before he died? But the man was dead now. Nothing could go wrong. The ritual had been followed correctly. Caleb accepted the chicken, which meant he agreed to the exchange. There was nothing to worry about. According to the healer, all that was left was to brew the expensive herbs and give the tea to my mother. Then, they would be completely free of me. But things took a turn my father had not anticipated. In his plan, Caleb was a loner. He expected him to die at home, and his body wouldn't be discovered until it started to smell. It would be a normal death for a recluse, and no one would suspect my father. But now, Caleb had died outside, in a bizarre and terrifying manner, sending the entire town into a panic. The town elder knew everyone in Black Creek Hollow. He figured Caleb might have been depressed and taken his own life. Why else would he go to a graveyard in the middle of the night? But suicide wouldn't leave a body so mangled. Maybe he was attacked by a wild animal? But when the Hollow had a wolf problem years ago, the victims were always half-eaten. Caleb's body was torn up, but not a single piece of flesh was missing. And if it was an animal, why was the chicken untouched? Caleb's condition was strange. His flesh was putrefied, as if he'd been dead for days. Even in the summer heat, a body wouldn't rot that fast. Some people were so scared they wanted to call the sheriff. The rumors grew more and more bizarre. Before the sheriff could arrive, another strange thing happened in Black Creek Hollow. Many children started crying at night, claiming to see Caleb's ghost standing outside their windows. News of this quickly reached the preacher who had first helped my father. This time, he didn't wait to be invited. He came on his own. The last time he came, he was wearing the flowing robes of a holy man, his hair tied in a knot. This time, he was completely different. He had shaved his head and wore the simple robes of a monk, with cheap straw sandals on his feet. He stood at the crossroads, and when he pursed his lips, you could see the stitches from my father's punch. The town elder was working in his field right by the crossroads. When the preacher said he had come to exorcise the evil, the elder dropped his hoe and immediately invited him to his house. One of the children who had been terrified by the ghost was his own grandson. The preacher gave the boy a piece of candy and spoke with him for a while. The boy described what he saw in vivid detail, so much so that the preacher felt as if he had seen Caleb's ghost himself. The boy was only 8, but he was a great storyteller. The preacher gave him a few more pieces of candy, which the boy immediately stuffed into his mouth. The preacher, rubbing his shaved head, decided to go see Caleb's body. Since Caleb had no family and his death was so gruesome, no one in the village dared to handle it. His body was being kept at the elder's house. The elder felt that Caleb had been a good kid when he was alive, and regardless of the ghost stories, it was a pity to leave him like that. He planned to bury him that day. The preacher now understood why the elder's grandson had seen Caleb's ghost. But since the body was here, there was no rush. The preacher first had a meal at the elder's house. They had rabbit stew, made from a wild rabbit caught 2 days before. It was delicious. The preacher, despite his monk's appearance, had no dietary restrictions and was the first to grab a leg. The elder didn't seem to mind, probably thinking that holy men were beyond such rules. After his meal, the preacher even chanted a prayer over the hunting rifle used to kill the rabbit before he went to see Caleb. A large crowd followed him, just like the crowd that had gone to the ruined chapel to see me after I died. The difference was, they had come to see me out of morbid curiosity. They followed the preacher to see Caleb out of fear, terrified of suffering the same fate. The preacher was indeed a man of experience. He went in, examined the body, and came out with his expression unchanged, his voice steady. He asked only one question: who was the last person to see Caleb alive? No one knows. Someone answered. Caleb didn't really talk to anyone. Well, I don't know if this counts, chimed in Evan, the eldest son of the Kent family. The night before last, on our patrol, we saw Caleb hanging around Jedediah Moss's front door. At this, a murmur went through the crowd. Jedediah beat him up a few days ago. He was probably trying to extort money from him. The Moss family has money. Evan spoke up again. And now that you mention it, that chicken Caleb offered at the grave looked a lot like the one Jedediah bought from me. The preacher touched the scar on his lip. Jedediah Moss, the one whose wife had the monstrous baby? You know about the monster baby too, Master? Jedediah went through a lot because of that baby. He even hired a traveling healer to perform a ritual. The preacher shot to his feet. This is a disaster.